I'm a Wendigo in the deep Canadian wilderness. Stay the fuck out of my woods. I was born in Canada. While I lived and attended college at Watt, I was well on my way to becoming a professional boxer, and I decided to take the weekend off with a friend, before the finals near the end of the year. We were going to go hiking in the deep woods, and being very experienced while my friend was a newbie, I brought more than enough supplies after the trek, and the first few days in, we were caught in a surprise blizzard, and had to take shelter inside a cave for a few days. When we ran out of our stockpiled firewood, my friend ran into the snow and never came back. We were essentially out of food and other supplies, so I ran out to look for her, and I found her dead body, where she had frozen to death. I brought her back to the cave and I sat there for an entire day, contemplating my decisions. I was a few hours away from starving to death when I made the quick and desperate decision to eat her raw flesh. We were very near, or even on, cursed or supernaturally possessed grounds, and that had something to do with what happened after I ate human flesh. I suddenly became very, very hungry after I ate a single chunk of flesh, and in a few minutes, I had eaten her entire body clean. The hunger was slightly relieved, and I was no longer cold, and my skin turned deathly pale. I roamed the woods for a couple of days, while my height grew at an extreme rate, and my fingernails had turned into long claws. I was somewhat sane, but I was driven by hunger and the urge to hunt. I became stronger, faster, more durable, and I killed a very large deer the first week after my transformation. I ate the entire thing, even the bones, and I cleaned its skull and wore it over my head, using it as a kind of armor and shelter. I left the area, eventually killing 16 people, and being responsible for many unexplained disappearances before I made it to America, where I made my way from Washington to Oregon, killing dozens of people and wildlife along the way. I slowly regained my sanity and was able to talk and hold very short conversations by the time I made it to Washington. Still, I forgot many social norms, and what would make a human. As a Wendigo, one of the strongest in the country, I fought many other cryptids and cryptid hunters, namely, I fought this bitch over in Oregon over a deer, and it was a draw as we both left, bloody, but I would have easily won if she didn't run. That bitch called herself Artemis or Aria. At the time of the fight I had regained half of my previous personality and sanity, so I was able to talk with the bitch during the fight. I had just entered Oregon, and I was stalking a massive buck in the woods. I stepped on a twig, and the buck looked at me and prepared to run as I prepared to pounce, when that bitch came out of the woods and grabbed the deer's antlers and gnawed its face off. She grabbed the deer as its headless body fell. She was about 5'10", with pale skin, wearing a torn-up gray hoodie, and had a large, grinning mouth filled with sharp teeth, and no eyes or a nose. "What the fuck are you doing?" I asked. "That's my fucking deer." "It's mine," she snapped. "Fuck off." Although I almost beat her, I severely underestimated her. I ran forward and slashed at her with my claws, but she dodged it and landed a kick to my thigh, and I instantly stumbled. She came back for another kick, but I managed to catch her leg, and I picked the 5'10" bitch up and swung her into several trees with my full power, slamming her into them and breaking them. She caught herself on one of the trees with her hands and kicked me in the face with her other leg, and I let go of her and fell back. We both stood up and squared up as we rushed each other. I slashed her with one of my claws, but she ducked again, and let out two powerful hooks to my ribcage. I lifted my knees and kicked her, but my kick was caught and she swiped my other leg, and I fell flat on my ass. She pinned me down with both her knees and pummeled my face, before I managed to grab her waist and fucking slammed her into the ground. I knocked the air out of her, stomped on her face several times, and pulled her up to throw a right hook so hard she flew. The bitch instantly got up and started running towards me, but instead stopped at the last second and shoved a stick down my throat. I stumbled, choking, as blood poured out of my throat. I pulled the stick out, and I was suddenly drop-kicked in the back, and I crashed into a tree. She kicked me, and I lifted my knee and blocked it before grabbing a boulder and chucking it at her. She dodged it and punched the boulder into a dozen pieces, and threw the shards at me. She closed the distance and tried to go for a combo, but I caught her first punch. "Shit," Artemis said as I grinned. I broke her wrist and was still holding her arm, as I spun and tossed her 50 feet into the air, and she landed somewhere in the distance with a loud crunch. I waited 5 seconds, which turned into 10, then 15, then 20, as I waited for her to come back rushing at me. I knew that fall hadn't killed her, and if I went back out to look for her I would get ambushed. I kept circling, and for 30 more tense seconds, everything was quiet, until I heard something crash onto a pile of leaves and sticks. I instantly rushed over and I found that the crash was made by a fucking rock that had been thrown. Shit. It was a fucking trap. I instantly turned around, and I was met by that bitch jumping and smashing a gigantic fucking boulder into the back of my head. I stumbled, and she followed up by tornado kicking me in the exact spot where she hit me with the boulder. My head was spinning, and I fell and tried to prop myself up on a tree. She ran forward and tried to punch me, but I finally blocked the punch and bit off Artemis's arm. The arm was much more durable than regular flesh I ate, and my teeth stung as I finally bit down and severed the arm. She jumped back and punched me in the face, and I stumbled, and then I grabbed her and threw her onto a fallen tree and tried stomping her, but she caught my leg and swung my entire body into the ground. I fell and coughed blood on the ground, and blocked another kick from her. We got up and traded blows when I managed to grab her shoulders and slam her into the ground. She got onto the ground and I pummeled her with my fists, but she kicked out my legs and managed to flip me onto the ground and hold my arm into a joint lock. I reached with my other hand and clawed her in the face, and my arm was set free. She finally kicked me in the stomach and I fell back, and I picked up a gigantic rock and smashed it into her face. "Well then," she said. "I guess it's a fucking draw." Before I could catch her, that bitch grabbed the dead deer and ran off into the night. Covered in blood, I let my wounds heal and went out to hunt. After that night, I had a few particular run-ins with a cryptid hunter named Zach, who profusely hunted me with huge-ass fucking guns. I first met him in 2017, when I had stayed in Oregon for quite some time. I was in the forest, hunting for straying hikers and campers, when I heard rustling 50 meters away from me, on a hill. I could notice this very easily, being that all the animals went silent whenever I was in the area. I turned to look at the source of the noise when I was hit with a large rifle bullet. I stumbled back, the bullet had lodged in between my ribs, but had not fully pierced through. I picked the bullet out and ran off, circling the source 100 feet away and attacking from behind. I found the guy, who was very tall for a human, about a foot shorter than me, making him 7 feet tall. He was holding a large rifle and was looking around, holding it up. I jumped out from behind him, startling him, and he shot a single round in my direction and I slammed my hand into his torso, sending him into the air as he flew back 10 feet and narrowly missed a tree. I ran to him, about to go for the finishing blow, but he pulled out a large pistol. "Fuck!" he yelled. He fired the pistol, and instantly, a dozen rounds slammed into my torso and head. I was instantly sent back, and I ducked behind a tree for cover as I let my wounds heal, making distance as I tried to sneak up on him again. The hunter, Zach, started firing his pistol whenever I made noise, and I decided to fuck it as I ran forward, taking several non-lethal hits before I tried to bite his head off and missed. Zach slammed a large knife into my neck, and I jumped back, pulling it out and throwing it back at him. The blunt part of the handle hit his leg, and he fell onto one knee and fired blindly again. I picked him up and chucked him, and he hit a tree and his armor got caught in a tree branch as he yelled. He pulled out another fucking pistol from a leg holster as I began running to him, and he put 10 shots into my legs. I fell flat on my fucking face and slid on the ground, as Zach jumped out of a tree with a tomahawk. I scrambled to get up and narrowly avoided a huge tomahawk swing. I grabbed his arm and bit a chunk out of his biceps. Zach jumped back, and he fucking pulled another pistol from his left thigh, and emptied the automatic pistol into my face. I fell onto the ground and took cover behind a tree as he peppered it with bullets. When I tried to run over to another tree for cover, he emptied another magazine into my torso, and I slowed down. I was significantly bleeding, with dozens of bullets lodged into me, and I was getting tired. Zach wasn't doing too well either, and I grinned and laughed when I saw him reach into his vest to pull out another magazine, only for there to be none. He was out of ammo. "Shit," he said. I ran forward, with my claws outstretched, and I was about to rip his fucking head off and shit down his throat when I noticed he was grabbing something from his vest. I tried to stop and dodge the attack, but I got too close, and he pulled out his fucking backup tomahawk and managed to swing at my head. He swung the tomahawk directly into my skull and it cracked it, but he was using only one arm, and the swing was significantly weakened. Blood poured out of my head and I stumbled, trying to grab the man before he got away. He threw a knife at my head, missing as he retreated and walked deeper into the woods. I pulled the tomahawk out of my face and threw it on the ground as I spat. I was going to get that fucker, and eventually I did. I'm a former Special Forces operator hired to hunt monsters. For your safety, please stay out of the deep Canadian woods. What's the difference between a monster and a man? To me, there's no difference. I've hunted both. Well, some of the things I hunt and have hunted are sometimes partly man or monster. Despite how cliché it sounds, I was an infantry soldier in the US Army, and I eventually got offered a spot on the 75th Ranger Regiment. Much later down the road, I earned the honor of becoming part of the renowned Delta Force. After 15 years of being a soldier, I was honorably discharged from there and was recommended to join a private military organization directly connected to and funded by the US government to be part of a task force. The relatively small task force consisted of 4 other soldiers. The first one, Gary, was a Korean American from Detroit and a Green Beret with his black hair tied up into a bun, and an attitude that granted him a lot of ass beatings. The second member of our little task force was Jack, a huge fucking Irish guy who was a CIA SAT operator and former Deborah operator. The third guy, Charlie, was from Arizona and had been in various organized crime for 5 years before becoming a mercenary working for an undisclosed corporation that was probably dedicated to torturing unicorns. And last but not least there was Hugo. Hugo was an extremely skilled ex-sniper in his late 40s, a former Navy SEAL, and a total hard-ass who barely smiled, or made any expression at all. We all sat down on chairs in a room with a man wearing $1 million 4-piece suit, who would brief us. None of us were informed why we were needed by the private military organization, but apparently, a huge sum of cash and benefits for life were involved. We were all flown to some secret massive compound/facility right in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina, and we all sat in a bare meeting room with the man who had brought us here, Smith, no last name. You're probably wondering why you're all here. You have all been brought here to do. The man was interrupted. Oh, just get to the fucking point already, Gary said, which caused everyone to look at him with annoyance. Shut up, boy. You want to fucking disappear? He continued, as I was so rudely interrupted. I was saying that you're all sent and hired to create a task force to hunt monsters and dangerous entities. Essentially, you'll all be hired as experimental elite mercenaries, in a team called Task Force Compass Nova Hunter. If this program is a success, you will all be granted to go through experimentation and rituals giving you superhuman physical abilities. There was a long pause. Are you shitting us? Hugo asked. No, Smith replied. He pulled out a small remote and then turned on a television in the back of the room. Gary whistled. This is gonna be good. Smith played a video on the television, with multiple images of a forest, with gory deer remains everywhere, on the high treetops. Then a picture of a dead gigantic tentacled entity, which was 100 feet in length. Then the screen switched to a blurry image of something that appeared to be humanoid, with a very long neck and head. Then it switched to a video of an extremely tall yet skinny and deformed man in an interrogation room, simply pulling his chains off when the interrogator was gone, and ripping a hole in the concrete wall with his bare hands. Then a picture of a huge map of the Appalachian Mountains, with red dots in specific locations and names attached to them. And then the video ended. Now do you believe this? Smith put the remote away. The pictures in the video were so fucking blurry, I said. Can't your suits get better quality? Nope, Smith replied. All of the pictures were taken by poor people. Smith proceeded to check one of the dozen Rolexes strapped to his left arm before clasping his hands together and grinning. Well, we're out of time here. I'll show you around. Get used to this shitty place. An hour later, and after some more boring briefings and slideshows, Charlie, Hugo, Gary, Jack, and I were in the armory of the private contractor's base, while one of Smith's employees showed us the weapons. Boss said you could use anything you want for the mission, so knock yourselves out. But you'll be fighting in the deep woods, and you'll need the heavy stuff, so choose well. Who's boss? Jack asked. Well, I'll see you later, the assistant said, ignoring the question and slipping out of the room. I got in my standard dress and gear, an assault pack, plate carrier, cargo pants, gloves, a ski mask, and noise-proof headphones before I picked a customized Benelli M4 out of the neatly organized armory, and also took out a combat knife and a few pistols. Jack picked out an identical assault rifle to Gary's, while Hugo, the sniper of the group, picked a Barrett M82. The next day, from North Carolina, we were deployed to a very, very remote part of the deep Appalachian wilderness, somewhere in West Virginia. A helicopter dropped us off, and we were assigned to hunt down and kill an unknown entity that was causing multiple deaths and disappearances. The plan was to cover and clear the area, then wait until nightfall, and when the creature was most active, we would kill it. So guns up, we walked through the deep, dark fucking woods. After hours of endless walking and awkward silence, Gary took out a cigarette and blew smoke at Charlie before turning to me. What do you call a building full of angry white people? Gary asked. What? I asked, scanning the trees for any signs of movement. Cut the shit, Gary, Hugo said. We're not here to fuck around. We're here too. Suddenly, something jumped from the trees and landed on top of Charlie. Fuck! He yelled. The monster turned its head and screeched. It was a huge, humanoid deer-like creature with a 15-point rack of antlers, and the monster had an abnormally large hinged jaw filled with huge and sharp teeth. Strangest of all, beneath each regular deer eye, were pairs of two yellow, reptilian eyes, which were seemingly the real eyes. I can't fucking get a good shot. Jack yelled. Kick the bitch off. Though the deer creature was at least twice Charlie's size, he managed to stab the fucker with a knife in the vital organ several times, which caused the monster to jump off. It got on all fours as Charlie kicked it off, and he scrambled back and stood up with his gun. Let's light up this fucking bee. We all unloaded our overloaded weapons on the creature, and it was instantly obliterated into a mushy pulp of monsters. It didn't go down, and it slowly got up, until Hugo sniped the monster's head. I saw it twitch, and slowly get back up, even though its face was a mushy pulp, and growled. Gary walked up to the monster, kicked it, and stomped on what was left of the monster, sending brain matter and guts everywhere. The creature didn't move after that. He spit his chewing tobacco on the dead monster. That's what you get, asshole. Wait, I need that. Unbelievably, Gary reached down and plucked what was left of his chewing tobacco off of the dead monster's mushy head. He blew it off, flicked a part of the monster's eye off of the chewing tobacco, and put it back in his mouth. Good as new, Gary said as he chewed the tobacco. There is something seriously fucking wrong with you, Gary, I said. Thank you, Matt. I radioed back to Smith, with the long-range radio. We killed the son of a bitch, I said. Already? Smith asked. Can you describe it? It looked like a deer out of hell, 6 eyes, 2 eyes were fake, it walked on 2 legs, had teeth like fucking needles, and a huge mouth. That ain't it, Matt, Smith said. You guys just killed a not deer. They're pretty common around these parts, but they still eat humans, so good job at killing it. You won't get anything from that. My heart dropped. You mean that what we just killed is not the target? No, what you're looking for probably eats not deer, based on the corpses we found. But we haven't gotten a real description of your target, since all the witnesses get killed. But if you see something that can move at incomprehensible speeds and has a kill count of over 50 armed men, then that's the target. Oh, I said. By the way, is that bitch-ass man Bun, Gary, I think, dead? No, actually, he's the one who finished it off. He just spit his chewing tobacco on the bloody not deer, but then picked it back off and put it back in his mouth because that was his last one. Hey, is that Smith? Gary asked, reloading his assault rifle. Yeah, I said. Fuck you. Smith spit and hung up when he heard Gary. So what did Smith say? Jack asked. I looked at the corpse of the dead not deer. We just killed is not the target. It's what the target eats. Fuck me, Charlie said. I should have reconsidered that damn contract. Well, we need to get moving anyway, it'll be nightfall soon, and we need to cover as much area as possible, Hugo said. I have a feeling that our target will come to us. That night, the rest of Compass Nova Hunter and I made a large campfire and sat around it, keeping watch. The woods were eerily silent, with not a bird chirping, not a squirrel or deer, although that might have been because of the gunshots we let out when an aggressive bear came too close for comfort. In the middle of the night, when it got much darker and colder, we started taking shifts of keeping watch and sleeping. When it was my turn to keep watch, I noticed movement in one of the higher trees. It was large, based on the way it was moving. I shook Gary and the rest of the group awake. Gary! Damn it, Gary! Wake up! What the hell? Gary stood up and grabbed his rifle. Movement. They're in the trees. Where else have I heard that before? Everyone took their positions, with Hugo sniping from the campsite and actively hunting for the monster. The creature jumped down from the trees, onto the ground, and began moving at incomprehensible speeds towards us. It was so fast that I couldn't make out any real physical details of the creature, other than it was at least the size of a military Humvee and it was crawling on all fours. I fired a shotgun and let a huge spray of Italian buckshot out at the creature, but I completely missed. The monster was now within 50 meters, based on what my headlamp and gun barrel flashlight were showing. With a loud gunshot, Hugo fired the 50-caliber rifle, amazingly hitting the monster. It screeched out in pain, and the bullet was powerful enough to temporarily stop it. In the sudden stop, I noticed one detail of the creature. If you begin to hear loud, hysterical laughing in the woods, run as fast as you can, and don't look back. Growing up, I loved to hike and venture out. I'm currently a regular 25-year-old. I thought I knew the woods, inside and out. But after what happened, I'm not sure. I was planning on hiking longer this time. I just got out of a relationship, so I was pretty stressed. I arrived there. I got everything I needed. As I wandered into the woods, the sound of the birds chirping calmed me somehow. I got hungry pretty quickly. I pulled out one of my vitamin bars and munched on it. I checked my watch, it read 7:36. I nodded to myself as I continued to wander deeper into the woods. I saw couples laughing as they walked past me. It got dark quickly. It seems as if I was daydreaming, and then I heard it. Loud hysterical laughter, extremely loud. I questioned it because I'd never heard it before. It was then a quick 20-second pause, then I heard a male and female scream. I got a chill, and they sounded absolutely frightened. I began to jog back to where my car was parked, and that was pretty far. I then leave crunching behind me and the sound of a brute-like person chasing me. Whoever was chasing me was wheezing loudly. It sounded big, but I didn't understand how it was keeping up with me. That's when I glanced at it. It was giant. I can't get the horrendous sight out of my mind. It had large overgrown hands, and it ran on all fours. It had no eyes, just black blood dripping from its eye sockets. Its mouth was unnaturally large, its ears large. It seemed attracted to sound. I halted and then dropped into the leaves. It began sniffing around. I then heard some other people running, and then the thing chased after them. I then heard flesh being torn apart, with the following screams of agony. I took the time to stand and walk slowly, definitely not wanting to make much noise. After about 20 minutes of walking, I made it to my car. I hit my nose incredibly hard on the ground when I fell. This happened almost 2 years ago, and I haven't been in the woods since. I know that thing is still lurking out there. Nobody deserves to die to that thing, and God only knows what that thing was. The time I entered a trance in the woods. This is a true story. It may not be the creepiest out there, but it affected me for years and goes to show just how deep into your brain you can fall. I was 13 years old and I went on a hike for my Duke of Edinburgh Award, a UK coming-of-age series of personal challenges. I walked 10 miles with my friend through woods and countryside, lugging our gear. We were pretty slow compared to the rest of the group, and our tent was already set up when we arrived, a 4-person thing that had to house 6 of us. We had an evening meal and went off for a walk through the woods where we came across some squatties who were also camping, although certainly not in the same luxury as we were. Think sleeping bag on the ground. Being young teens, some of the group thought they were very grown up to be chatting to some 17-year-olds and wanted to stay for a while, but I was nervous that we had strayed and went back to the camp. The other girls finally arrived back late, to the annoyance of the camp leader, and we all piled into the tent to get to sleep. It was hot and we didn't bother with sleeping bags, just crammed in alongside each other like logs, alternating top to toe and complaining about the mosquitoes. I was on the outer edge of the sleeping area and was turned towards the fabric of the tent, all too aware that immediately beyond that thin piece of fabric were some very dark woods. I'll be honest, I was very scared. I lay there for what seemed like hours, unable to sleep, just staring at the fabric, aware I was the only one awake and feeling the most exposed to danger. And I just couldn't get to sleep. It wasn't happening for me, so instead I just focused on the tent wall and my mind went pretty blank. After what seemed like hours, I felt a tapping on the back of my leg. I tried to ignore it, what with still being stricken with fear, and the tapping, though gentle, became more insistent. Then I started hearing a voice, a very small and far away voice saying my name over and over. Jesus, I was scared by this point. I tried my best to maintain my fixed stare, unable to breathe, refusing to acknowledge that it was happening when all of a sudden whoosh. The noise suddenly thundered into my ears, my friend screaming my name, and the tapping on my leg turned suddenly into something a lot more. The girl next to me was fully kicking me in the leg to try to wake me up. I sat up and there were hands running along the outside of our tent all over, and the girls in the tent were screaming. The girl who had been kicking me was distressed. Why hadn't I woken up? They had been trying to wake me but couldn't. They thought something was wrong with me. Almost immediately we heard laughter. The owners of the hands were none other than the squatties, come to torment us in the night. Every one of us sat back with relief, but the scarier thing was that they hadn't been able to wake me and they struggled to understand why. I understood it though. I must have fallen into some sort of trance, so scared of my situation that my brain had somehow switched off to outside input, become so super focused on the fabric, and my feelings of fear that reality just got blocked out. Yet I had been awake, that was for sure. I knew I hadn't spent even a minute asleep. I'll never forget that tapping on my leg. I still think about it today, and how scared I was because I could feel that tapping very palpably, with no plausible explanation for it, and just how it felt when the full force of it properly dragged me out of my own head, making me realize just how deeply lost I had been inside. It lives deep in that mountain. If you DoorDash, do not deliver to 166 Lower Creek Road. If you get that address, please cancel immediately. Ignore the high tip. It's not worth it. I haven't been DoorDashing long. I think it's been 2 months since I started, and now I'm writing this submission from the trunk of my car. Why am I writing this, instead of calling the cops? Well, because I've already called 911, and the dispatcher laughed and hung up. According to her, 166 Lower Creek Road doesn't exist and they get a prank call about that address every other night. Hell, she even said that Lower Creek Road has been closed for years. So I'm writing my story here because you all will believe me. I was in the last 10 minutes of a 4-hour shift with DoorDash. When I saw that it was 10:50 p.m., I decided to call it a night and head home. I then attempted to end my dash, but a new order popped up. Go to McDonald's. The pay showed $50. The pay is usually $10 at the highest. I couldn't say no. I was already close to McDonald's and it didn't take long to get there. Once inside, the cashier informed me that there wasn't a DoorDash order with the order number I had. I looked at the items ordered and it was just ice water and nothing else. $50 pay for an ice water. Whatever, I'll take it. The cashier laughed at the order and handed over a large styrofoam cup of water. She informed me they get an order like this every other night. As I walked back to my car, I felt very weird about this order. My gut told me to cancel, but I had already left the store with the item. The delivery address was only 3.5 miles out, and I reminded myself of the high payout. Money that I really needed. So I pulled out onto the highway and made my way to Lower Creek Road. In no time the GPS had me on a heavily wooded dirt road. It was very curvy and hard to navigate in the dark. My paranoia had me seeing things out of the corner of my eye. I pressed on. After what felt like an eternity, the GPS said aloud, "Turn left onto Lower Creek Road in a quarter mile." Once at the road, there wasn't any road sign, but I made the left anyway. "Your destination will be on your right in 1 mile," the GPS said. Off the bat, I noticed none of the mailbox numbers started with a 1. They all started with a 6, and if the road was like any other, then the actual address of my destination was 666 Lower Creek Road. Now, I'm not religious or superstitious, but the idea that the address was actually 666 made me feel even more worried. All the homes on the road looked very run down and deserted. I was now only about 400 feet from my turn and I could see an old rusty mailbox at the head of the driveway. Sure enough, the numbers on the mailbox read 666. The GPS sang out that I was at my destination and the DoorDash app read off the delivery instructions. "Leave at my feet, do not disturb." Those words chilled me. Usually, the directions were a simple leave at door or hand to customer. I slowly pulled down the driveway, which was fully surrounded by thick undergrowth and large trees. The little dirt road finally gave way to an opening. There was no house in the clearing. Sitting right in the middle of the opening were what seemed to be 3 men. They were sitting on lawn chairs in a semicircle. They were illuminated by a blue light that was being emitted from the ground by what looked like a projector. They all had their hands up in the air and were looking directly into the blue light. The scene made me so nervous I began to feel nauseous. I got out of my car and slowly walked towards them. I have never walked so slowly and quietly in my life. I didn't want them to notice me at all. Once I reached them, I could tell they were all completely naked. The man in the middle had a small box in his lap and smoke was coming from the box like something was smoldering inside it. There is a strong smell of burning hair around them. The only noise was the hum of the protector. I approached the man closest to the road and carefully tried to set the cup of ice water at his feet. My hands were shaking too badly, and I dropped the cup, spilling the water all over his feet. None of them had any reaction. I promptly stood up and walked back to the car as fast as I could. My heart was beating out of my chest. When I got within about 5 feet of my car, I looked back towards the men. Only one of them remained in his seat. The other 2 were gone. For a moment, everything felt still and then the man's head snapped in my direction. He stood immediately and started sprinting towards me. I turned quickly to get in my car, but what I saw stopped me completely. The other two men were sitting in the driver and passenger seats. Both of them stared forward. I heard the man's footsteps closing in from behind me, and before I could react, he tackled me headfirst into my car. The impact was violent and I immediately felt blood running down my face. As I pleaded, the man dragged me back to the lawn chairs. He threw me down in the middle chair and dumped whatever was burning in the small box over my head. The embers burned my scalp. I began to scream as the man grabbed my face and forced me to stare into the light. My eyes began to get very heavy, and I couldn't keep them from closing. When they opened, I was no longer in the middle of the woods at night. It was now daylight. I was now high in the mountain and seated in front of a massive opening on the side of the mountain. Carvings were all around the outside of the opening. The carvings depicted faces with their mouths agape. The men were seated beside me. All three hummed in unison. The opening gave way to a large pit that seemed to be forever deep. A large gust of wind pushed out from within the mountain before the air was sucked back into the opening forcefully. It was like the mountain was breathing. Each exhale pushed me away. Each inhale pulled me closer and closer to the pit. My eyes widened as I realized it wasn't the mountain breathing, but that something very large down inside the mountain was the source of the air. Something very massive. Something very alive. Just the thought of the unidentified being made me want to scream out in madness. My fixation on the abyss was broken by a buzzing and vibration in my pocket. My phone was ringing. This broke my trance, and I realized I was back in the woods in the middle of the night. I looked around me and realized that the three men were still in a meditative state as they looked into the blue light. I jumped from the chair and started a dash for my car. I crashed into the driver's side door and dug for my keys. Nothing. They were gone. I looked towards the men and noticed they were now walking towards me. I noticed my trunk was open and hopped inside before slamming it down. That's how I ended up in the trunk. I'm lying here with no hope. I just want you to know to never deliver to 666 Lower Creek Road. Also, there is something in that mountain. It's alive and it wants us all. Horror and evil have an ancient face. I saw it after a car crash with my friends in the deep woods of Wisconsin. Please send help. That thing hunting us. Going to my friend's secluded cottage up north seemed like a good idea until the car crashed into a tree in the middle of a raging blizzard, 20 miles away from the cottage. I kept trying to convince my friends to stop at a hotel or something, but the driver and the owner of the car, my old college roommate Jackson, kept brushing my concerns off as if the approaching snowstorm wasn't even coming. I bet he wished he had listened after the car crashed. "Oh fuck shit," Jackson said, pulling me out. "Anything broken?" "No," I answered. The only other friend who was crazy enough to come with us was John, who stood in front of the hood, inspecting the damage. Based on how smoke was coming out of the engine, we wouldn't be able to turn it back on without assistance. "Are the phones okay? We might be able to call for help." Jackson showed us his phone, which had broken during the crash, and said, "Like hell, we can. We don't even get service this far. We can't stay in the car, and if we don't want to freeze to death, we need to go somewhere to stay." He was right. The metal in the front of the car was compressed from the impact, and after we had all gotten out, a very heavy tree branch fell on the roof of the car, crushing the metal into tin foil. No way we were going to fit in that car. We were on a dirt road with woods surrounding us on both sides, and the closest town was 2 miles away. The snow was heavily blowing down, and as unusual as it sounded, there was a heavy fog obscuring our vision. "Well, let's at least get moving," I said. "Someone might live along the road." They didn't argue. We put on our jackets, packed all the food and water we could carry, and we prepared to set off down the road, into a snowy abyss. When John pulled out 2 guns from the trunk, I got confused. "Why are you bringing the guns?" I shouldn't have even asked. When John went anywhere near the countryside, he carried at least 2 high-powered guns, because of an incident that happened a year ago. Eric always had a pump-action Mossberg 500, and a Taurus Raging Hunter revolver at his side. He tossed me the giant handgun. "There's creatures in these woods. I've seen them before. You can never be too safe." I knew better than to question John. He was always a cautious, down-to-earth guy, who always paid attention to all the details around him. Jackson, on the other hand, was the opposite. Whenever problems would arise, he would either brush them off or straight up ignore them or say fuck it and do something stupid. "Alright. Looks like the fucking storm is blowing in hard. What the hell are we going to do?" I said. And with that last comment, we began to walk down the road, searching for anything that would indicate that a single person was out there. As luck would have it, the immense snowstorm was keeping everyone inside, if there were even people living all the way out here. To say that the cold was terrible is a vast understatement. We were only wearing thick jackets and 2 layers of pants, and even that wasn't enough to keep us warm, given that there was a very plausible chance of catching hypothermia. "Shit. How far did we walk?" Jackson asked, once our car was well out of sight. "We're not even close," I said. "Just shut up and wait till we get there." "Like you ever do that." "Guys." It was John. His face looked pale as if he was retelling the horrible incident he had gone through a year ago. About a year ago, John had gone on a camping trip, alone in the woods behind his cottage. It was at the peak of the night when he heard something moving around outside his tent. Something big. When he looked outside, he saw something just beyond the tree line, and he could just make out that something's silhouette. According to John, who almost never told lies or made up stories, a thing was watching him. He remembered it very vividly. It was humanoid, but it wasn't human. It was 8 feet tall, extremely skinny, hairless, and it had antlers. And after all this time, after everything, after all the nightmares, we were seeing the exact thing John had seen that night. Expect it was dead. But it wasn't just dead, it was mutilated. Mangled. The dead creature lay on its side on the side of the road, unmoving. The creature's entire body was skinny and pale, and its head was identical to a deer skull, complete with an impressive array of antlers that were snapped and completely shattered. But it wasn't just dead. One of the creature's legs was ripped off, and it looked like something enormous had taken a bite out of its shoulder and stomach. The creature was eaten. Killed. By a horror we couldn't even begin to fathom. And worst of all, the creature looked to be killed recently, with a blood trail heading into the woods. And based on how heavy the snow was falling, the creature would have had to be killed at least 10 minutes ago, for the blood trail to not be covered by snow already. "Holy shit, man," Jackson exclaimed. "Isn't that the thing John saw last year?" "Fuck this." John stuttered. "Why yeah." I stared at the dead creature, and despite not wanting to know the truth of what really happened, I already knew. Something bigger had killed this thing. But something killed it. This thing is already huge, so what killed it must be enormous. John looked away from the creature. "It's dead, we know. But something killed it, and it's probably nearby. So we should get the hell out of here now." Roger loaded the bullets into his shotgun and shivered. I turned, and saw something in the woods that horrified me. It was holding the bloody remains of one of those other monsters with a hand of a million jagged and broken fingers. It had a distorted, amorphous, and shifting face of 1,000 glassy midnight black eyes and pseudopodia and tentacles and teeth, and symbols that made satanic engravings look like heaven. It grinned with an incomprehensibly large mouth that should have been physically impossible, and I heard it say in a voice that almost tore my threads of sanity apart, "ISHAL iota LS iota AVEYOU iota FO iota R iota LAS iota T." I screamed, then looked at the blood trail heading deep into the woods. Then we turned, and continued down the road, being stalked by an eldritch horror and searching for help that would never come. I and my friend found a book deep in the woods. We should have never opened it. Me and my friend sat on the couch still planning our hike. He sipped his tea and let out a deep sigh. How about we go out at about 5 p.m. maybe? That sounds about right. I nodded. Let's get packing, yeah? He got up with a groan. We began to pack all the necessary things. We got into my car and drove off. I hummed, turning on the radio. It wasn't that long until we arrived. We got out, throwing our equipment on our shoulders. We walked deep into the woods. My friend took out his phone. It was about 8 p.m. We both took out our flashlights. We were both quiet. I looked over at my friend. He looked extremely paranoid. I chuckled under my breath. What's up? You scared? I slightly nudged his shoulder. Ah, fuck off, wait. What's this? He knelt down, picking up a dirty dusty book. It had no title. Just a blank front. He opened the book, and we both read the page in our head. It read, "You opening this book, and reading this page will wreak havoc upon the earth." We both gave each other that oh shit look. He flipped through the other blank pages. "Look man, it's most likely nothing, you know," I said. He had this odd look on his face, and he began digging a hole with his hands. He placed the book in the hole, throwing the dirt over the book. "We're fucked, man," he repeated multiple times. It seemed as if nature grew more aggressive. I looked up at the sky. It was being overwhelmed by blackness. We both started sprinting back to my vehicle. I put the keys in, turning the car on. As soon as we got on the road, we saw a giant tornado. It was swooping up houses, cars, etc. Fuck. I swerved, and I somehow kept the car on the road. My friend was sweating, practically hyperventilating. I stopped the car and turned around. The tornado was coming our way with ferocious speed. I floored the gas pedal. I saw a giant rock coming from above the sky. We saw it land in the distance. When I landed, it sounded like someone had set off 500k fireworks. Another one landed in the woods, fire erupting from the trees. I could see cars swerving and crashing in the distance. It began raining acid. The acid hit my car, and it seeped through the metal. It landed on my neck. It felt like someone stabbed me with a 100-degree knife. I lost control. We crashed full force in a truck. My friend was ejected from the vehicle and I stayed in. I woke up to a wound in my arm. I groaned, rubbing my head. I looked at my surroundings. It looked like hell. Everything burning. I saw a large creature in the distance. As it walked, I felt a giant shockwave. I put my arm up. My hair was thrown back. I began looking around for my friend, and I yelled out his name multiple times. No response. It was hot as fuck. It felt like my skin was burning. I limped around, thinking what the fuck is happening in my head. I fell to my knees, nearly pulling out all my fucking hair. I limped through the road, trying to look for anyone else. "We should have never opened the fucking book. We caused the end of the world," I murmured. I then saw a gigantic rock coming down, fire erupting from it. I began praying, hoping I'd wake up sooner or later. I opened my eyes. I'm still here. I don't know what's happening or what to do. If you guys see an odd-looking book, walk away from it. I found a mailbox in the woods. I don't know what is following me. At this point, I hope it's supernatural, because if a human is stalking/hunting me right now, that's even more terrifying. I am in the middle of absolute nowhere. My name is Zed. Nothing about me is important, but I'm going to write it down here in case anyone finds this journal. The same journal I found. The same one I have been invested in lately. The same one that may have led to my premature death. I don't know how much time I have, so I will only jot down the facts. When I am done, I will leave it right here in this abandoned shed. I found it, so I am sure some other unfortunate dummy will also. Something is moving outside. I knew I didn't have much time, but apparently, I had less than that. 1 month earlier. Hey guys, Woodsman Zed here. Today is day 30 of my trek across the fine United States of America. I've found myself at nearly my halfway point. I'm in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. A place so close to nature and beautiful, that God himself would be jealous. There are more deer than people, and white pines are more common than paved roads. It's pretty wild how untamed some of these woods are. Thank you all for following me on my journey. I'll be uploading this once I get back to some semblance of society, at least with some Wi-Fi. That'll work for a little update. I can put a 9-10 minute video out tonight with some random footage I've gotten. Hopefully, this motel's Wi-Fi can help me out. Tomorrow I'll do my signature camping in the woods bit and move on to the next. Hey everyone, Woodsman Zed here. I'm going deep into the Porcupine Mountains. Let's see what the harsh deep woods of Upper Michigan have in store. I've got all my regular gear, and packing light as always. Sleeping pad, camo tent, and a bottle of Traverse City cherry vodka. Gotta have a drink from the region. Tonight's meal will be a simple sausage and potato meal cooked up on the mini butane heated cooker. Alright. Food is ready, vodka is poured, and crack. What the hello? Silence. Must have just been an animal. No shortage of them around here. Just continue the video. So, I was saying, it's time to sit back and relax, read some comments that I picked from my last video. First one reads, Zed, what kind of dash what the foo? Something just growled. My heart is pumping. Stop the recording. Something doesn't feel right. Just then a pair of yellow eyes glints in the distance. The ground tremors. There's only one word that appears in my mind. Between my eyes, run. I picked up my backpack, completely abandoning my tent and food. I left the still burning sausages. Not a considerate camper, but I'd rather not be something else's dinner. A low growling rumbled to my left and right. This omnipresent auditory distress made me feel dread like never before. I ran. I used every ounce of my outdoor experience, dodging stumps, and jumping over down trees. When I thought I was clear, I finally stopped to take a breath. The sound was gone. I slowly turned around. I feared the worst, and I found it. Several sets of eyes greeted me from throughout the woods. I decided to be brave. "WHO's there," I yelled. The echo painfully filled the deep woods air. I watched in panic as the eyes slowly disappeared from left to right. Is this a prank? I can't imagine anyone would be this coordinated this deep in the woods. The sun had just fallen below the horizon. The radiant light just barely illuminated the forest floor. Shit, I have to go. In my confusion and panic, I was not aware of where I was. My compass would be no help. I don't know what direction I came from or where I should go. Thankfully, I could not hear anything tracking me. I didn't see any glowing eyes either. Small win. Hey guys, Zed here. I'm being very quiet because something is wrong. I'm not even trying to be funny or make this sound scarier than it is. Something is out here with me. I don't know how long I've been out here. But the sun is rising. How the hell? Hold on. Shut this stupid recording off. The sun just set. Am I losing it, being out in the woods for so long on this dumb 30 days across America video? Because I cannot see what I think I'm seeing. A mailbox. In the middle of the woods. Cautiously I approach it. I can see now that there's a somewhat worn trail leading to the mailbox. It's a footpath, barely a foot in width. I ignore what I think are tiny footprints leading up to the wooden post with a white mailbox anchored in the center. The older style mailbox has a similarly old red flag on the side of it. U.S. Mail is stamped on the face. The metal tab on the front of the box is begging me, pleading for me, to open it. What, am I not going to? Slowly, I opened the box. Without knowing at the time, I grabbed my knife off my hip. The rising sun lit up the inside just enough to see a symbol. An arrow, pointing behind me. A rustling sound, just as I did. I didn't look in the direction of the arrow. A certain trap, a certain death. Not this time, universe. I booked it in the opposite direction, the rustling sounds increasing, sounding like whatever was coming for me was very happy to meet me. Good thing I decided not to turn around and trust my instinct to run. This time I dropped my pack to move as fast as possible. I must have run for miles. At some point, I felt hot breath on my neck. The smell. I can't place it. I don't want to. I don't know how I escaped it. Like a snake with its head cut off, I didn't know I was dead, I mean alive, until I stopped. But I was still very much alive. And looking at another mailbox. This one was painted black. The same U.S. Mail marking was stamped on the front. The red flag. The red flag was up. A message. A national symbol for please open. Again, I did as I was directed to. I slowly opened the mailbox. Rust fell from the door. Creaking noises filled the now quiet air. The sun was setting. How was it already setting? But there was again just enough light to fill the interior of the mailbox. I wish there was no light to show me what was inside. A note. A small white piece of paper folded in half. With trembling, fatigued hands, I opened the note. You should have listened. My heart dropped. Should have listened to what? The last damn mailbox? The arrow that pointed to my certain doom? Wait. I see a light. Maybe 100 yards away. Coming from what looks like a shed. A shed in the middle of the woods? I'm drawn to the structure. Who would put such a structure here, in the middle of nothing? There's a fire inside. I am tired. I'm hungry, I'm weak. The shed is bare. Just 4 walls made out of rough aluminum. The floor is earth. The fire is not here. The only light was in my mind. There's a book here. Current day. To all that finds this. My name is Billy Bother. I've escaped from the basement after 30 days. I can't find my way out of this shed. The sounds, the banging noises, the growling. I don't know what it all is. This shed appeared to me while hiking. I was lost, I don't even know why I started trekking through the woods. The masks are out there. Please, if you find this, please try to find me. I hope you don't find this at all, to be honest. If you do, I don't think you're going to ever leave.